Greetings everyone, this is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. You see, I was challenged by Bunkmaster B on Comics on YouTube to select my 5 most important comic books. He's calling it the 5 Comic Challenge, and I thought it sounded like a lot of fun. My understanding is the rules are fairly loose. Basically, I just outlined the 5 most important comics to me in my collection. No real criteria as to why they're the most important. It could be value, it could be sentimental, it could be quality of story, what have you. At any rate, I thought it sounded like a ton of fun, so I think we're going to give it a go. And just before we jump into the list today, I always want to shout out the channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, I always encourage you to check them out. You can use my promo code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to receive $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate code or link to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support this channel. Thank you for considering. Now let's get going with today's list. First on my most important comics list, Jonathan Hickman's House of X Powers of 10 from Marvel Comics. This is just such a fantastic graphic novel. I absolutely love this maxi series. I think it's a total of about 12 issues. I have the trade paperback collection here. They've also released it in an oversized hardcover edition that I believe is out of print. Why this book is so important to me is that this successfully rejuvenated my interest in the X-Men and really kicked off my greater X-Men reading that I did the past year or so. Before I read this, I had never even really delved deep into Chris Claremont's X-Men run. I just dabbled with issues here and there from various runs. Yes, I did read some Claremont, but this really sparked my interest anew for all things X-Men. Yes, it completely reset the status quo for X-Men and all of the adjacent X books, setting up the Krakoa era where the mutants kind of have their own nation state and become kind of a world superpower. This is the event that kind of starts it all. And from here, I actually went forward and read all of Jonathan Hickman's run on X-Men, along with some of those aforementioned adjacent X-book titles. But I couldn't get enough. From here, I also started reading all of the Chris Claremont era of X-Men. I'm still somewhere around Mutant Massacre era, but I've really just loved it. So I think for me, when I think about why this book is so important, is it really kindled this love of X-Men I've had for the last year or so. And for me, this is also just a quintessential Marvel read at this point. I think anyone who's interested in modern Marvel comics, this is at the top of my recommendations list without a doubt. I absolutely love it. It's a fantastic science fiction series that has the veneer of X-Men, and I just think it really works. There's all sorts of interesting storytelling mechanics in here. I don't want to spoil too much in this video, but I did do a full review of this whole book on my channel. But at any rate, this is one of my absolute favorite comic books. Again, I talk about it so much. I recommend it often. I always like to revisit and look at it. I think the art is absolutely astonishing. And like I said, it's important to me not only for being a kind of standalone, fantastic graphic novel, but really for all of this stuff it inspired in me and my interest in the X-Men from here on out. I think for me, going back and reading older X-Men after reading House of X Powers of 10, I really just see how good this graphic novel is. It definitely understands these characters, and it really takes them to new extremes, new heights, and a new normal. It's just absolutely incredible. I know I'm gushing about it, but it's just really amazing. I had to include it on my list. This book is very important to me, and I definitely recommend it. Let me know what you think of House of X Powers of 10 in the comments below. I always love talking about this book, so I'd be interested to hear what you had to say as well. Next on my list is Daredevil by Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Maleev. This is the first volume of the Ultimate Collection. Their entire run is captured across 3 volumes, roughly this size, all in paperback, which I have. They also have omnibus editions. I think it's a 2-volume set. That's an oversized hardcover edition. There's also smaller trade paperbacks, individual issues, things like that. At any rate, this is how I collected the Daredevil Bendis run, and this is my favorite favorite Daredevil run I've ever had the opportunity to read in comics, and it's also my favorite superhero of all time. Longtime fans of the channel might know that. I've definitely discussed Daredevil at various points on the channel, but I've never really reviewed these books specifically, only because I want to do them justice. I want to articulate the best I can just why I love them so very much. So if you haven't yet, definitely consider subscribing to the channel, and who knows, you might see me drop a review on this Bendis Daredevil run. But at any rate, I absolutely love this series. I think for me, I was already really loving my read-through of the Daredevil comics. I started with Kevin Smith's Guardian Devil, and I went through this series run up till basically modern ongoing titles with Zdarsky right now. But this run in particular has always stood out as basically my favorite. And I think because I love the way it really highlights the kind of gritty crime noir aspects of the Daredevil universe, and so much of that is captured by Alex Maleev's incredible artistic style. It has this kind of sketchy, hard-lined, kind of not rushed, but very quick looking style. It's not polished, it's not smooth, it's not cleaned up. It's really kind of edgy and ragged, but it's also just absolutely stunning. Like I said, it really paints the world in which Daredevil's storytelling just explodes across the page. This is a darker tale on Daredevil. This goes into really heavy street crime, gangster kind of elements, and so that kind of feel with the art, in conjunction with some of the best Bendis storytelling I've ever had the pleasure of reading, we really have a crime noir vigilante superhero comic to remember for the ages, as far as I'm concerned. Really, they understood the character of Matt Murdock, they understood the character of Daredevil, and so much of the supporting cast of heroes and villains in his universe. This is just an astounding read that I would recommend to anyone who was interested in Daredevil. I've really never read anything like it. I know for me, Ed Brubaker is another one that comes to mind when I think of a comic book kind of crime fiction writer, but I think Bendis really has the chops for it, and reading what I see here in Daredevil, also what I've read of Alias and some of his other titles, I get why. He definitely knows what he's doing, and this is definitely Bendis and Maleev in some of their strongest top form. Absolutely love this book. It's so important to me because it's one of my favorite comic runs of all time. Next up on my 5 most important comics list, Invincible Ultimate Collection Volume 1 by Robert Kirkman. Yes, I had to include this. This incredible comic series comes to us from Image Comics. Like I said, this is an ultimate collection, which means it's an oversized hardcover edition. It's the same size as an omnibus, but maybe like 300 or 400 pages, give or take. I love this set. I know that this whole run of Invincible is divided up across 12 of these ultimate collections, but of course there are other formats out there that you can pursue to read this incredible series. This is a really self-contained superhero story from an indie publisher, so they're able to do things that the big two at Marvel and DC just aren't really able to do. We have a very clear beginning, middle, and end to the story here in Invincible, and this first Ultimate Collection includes the first, I believe, 13 issues, give or take, and for me, this is really what establishes this series as a whole. I think it can start pretty mundane and kind of slice of life with a splash of superheroics thrown in there, but by the end of this single Ultimate Collection, I know, for me, I was absolutely hooked, and I was already committed to reading the rest of the series once I reached its end. This book is so surprising. It's basically about a young man who's in high school. His name is Mark Grayson, and his father is the world's greatest superhero, Omni-Man. He's kind of like a Superman analog, came from a distant planet to become Earth's biggest hero, and all this time Mark is just wondering when he's going to get superpowers, if he's going to get superpowers, and within the first issue or two, lo and behold, he starts developing his own superpowers, super strength, flight, and more. This has the feel of kind of a superhero tropey kind of comic, but it goes so deep within the characters, the world building, and it's just so compelling. I think that Kirkman really understands characterization, and that is in full view within this series. The scope of it is positively breathtaking. It's so hard to articulate just how good this series is. You kind of have to read it to believe it. I know they are also doing an animated series on Amazon Prime right now. They've actually released the first season of that, which I also recommend is quite good. I've also reviewed the first two of these Ultimate collections on my channel as well, so you can definitely search out those videos. I really love this series. It's such a spectacular tale, like I said. I know I'm just gushing, but it really is that good. I don't even know how Kirkman achieved it, but by a couple issues in, I absolutely adored the main cast of characters to the point that I was engaged no matter what they got up to. And the storylines are intriguing, they're great, there's so many twists and turns and revelations. It really is at its core a character drama that's all wrapped up in a superhero narrative. It is really fantastic. I could not rate it high enough, honestly. It's very, very good. The artists change hands once or twice throughout the series, but all the artists attached are also really spectacular. This is again something I'd recommend to almost any comic fan. Next on today's list, The Ultimate Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 1 by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley from Marvel Comics. This is the first volume of, I'm hoping, at least a 4-volume omnibus set that includes this entire series run. I love this series. This is part of Marvel's Ultimate Universe, which was kind of a side universe to their mainstream 616. It was kind of a contemporary relaunch of some of their classic titles. This one, of course, being Spider-Man, though this time the origin story happens in the early 2000s. And presents us with a much more modern Peter Parker and cast of characters. As a longtime Spider-Man fan, this series really just blew my hair back to just see how much of the initial spirit of Spider-Man they captured, while also just blazing a new trail for an entire new generation of readers. This is essentially just a Spider-Man series, but it really focuses on a younger teenage Peter Parker and his exploits in high school trying to become a superhero, right wrongs, save the day, protect his city, his family, his loved ones, and of course we have an amazing love story between him and Mary Jane Watson. This is such a memorable series. There were times throughout this series run that I definitely laughed and definitely cried. I'm not going to lie to you. It is so emotionally gripping, and it also just shows me the tremendous range Brian Michael Bendis has as a writer. I know I had him earlier in this list for his Daredevil run, which was dark, gritty, and intense, kind of crime noir. Here, though, we have a much lighter-hearted, for the most part, Spider-Man story that's quippy and fun, and there are some really dramatic moments, but it's also designed more for a teenage kind of demographic overall. And I just think it's so interesting to see the diversity of this writer. I think it's really extraordinary. And of course, for art, we have the incredible Mark Bagley, who is a longtime Spider-Man penciler, and for my money, I would say this Ultimate Spider-Man run and the Spider-Man Life Story series from Chip Zdarsky are some of the best pencil work I've ever seen from Mark Bagley. I know within Ultimate Spider-Man, the art is so polished and clean and beautiful, it's just hard to explain. You can see it here as I'm presenting it, but it is just really luscious and beautiful. There is such a great flow of action, the character models are all very distinctive. I love seeing how they remix some of the classic villains even, and just seeing how they were designed by Bagley and Bendis. It really is just a ton of fun. It's also a perfect entryway for new readers to pick up Spider-Man. If they've never read anything, you can start at the beginning of Ultimate Spider-Man and just get lost in this amazing journey. Why it's so important to me is that this was one of the first big Spider-Man runs I had ever read in its entirety, and like I said, by the end, I was just a weeping mess, and so to have a storytelling experience in a comic book like this, I was blown away, and it will always have a place in my heart because of that. And I think to this end, it is so important to me, and a series I definitely recommend, especially for readers who like Spider-Man who maybe haven't given it a chance yet. And finally, last and certainly not least, Batman by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo Omnibus Volume 1 from DC Comics. This is the first volume of a 2-volume set that collects the entirety of their Batman run along with Last Night on Earth. It really is an impressive volume. This Volume 1 in particular includes the whole Court of Owls arc, the death of the family story, as well as Batman's 0 Year, and of course a couple other miscellaneous issues and things like that. I think for Court of Owls alone, this would certainly be in my top 5 list, but to have so many of the best arcs from Snyder and Capullo in one incredible hardcover, I had to include this omnibus. Those who have seen my recent haul videos might notice that this is actually a book I just got this last month. Before this, I had the standard size hardcovers for most of this run, and I had those books for so long and I loved them, but I was always intending to upgrade to the omnibuses simply because this is my favorite Batman run of all time that I've had the pleasure of reading. And like I said, that Court of Owls story is one of my favorite comic book stories of all time, and I wanted to see it in an oversized format. And this omnibus does not disappoint. I think for me, one of my favorite things about this run is that it's absolutely friendly to new readers of the Batman franchise, but it also really understands the character of Batman and Gotham City as a kind of personified character. I don't know how else to describe it, but the world building within the Snyder Capullo run is just so filled out and immersive. I feel like I'm right there engaged in the storytelling. I also love that we have kind of a new version of Batman's origin. I love Batman Year One, but I think Zero Year is also a fantastic Batman origin story. This run is, again, a ton of highs for me. I love the whole run. I know some people don't like the back half of the Snyder Capullo run, but I really enjoy the whole thing personally. This book was so gripping for me. It's one of the things that got me absolutely into Batman comics. I was already reading Batman. He was a cultural just hero to me. I loved Batman growing up, but I really started to first get into comics right around when DC launched New 52, so this was one of the first DC New 52 titles I remember reading, and I was so hooked. And so for me, this is not only important because I think it's a great chapter in Batman history, it's not only important because I think for my money, it's my favorite Batman run of all time. It's important to me because I associate it with the time I was first really getting into comic books on my own and really starting to pick up my own collections and really just reading it for my own just enjoyment. I get so nostalgic around this book. It really does timestamp for me a specific time and place in my life. And now that I've upgraded to an omnibus edition, I hope I can treasure it for a long time forward. I really love this book. I highly recommend it or just the Snyder Capullo Batman run in general. I think it's an important one, and I hope you enjoy reading it as well. And that's my list, everyone. I'm sure this list will change and fluctuate as time goes on, but for right now, these are my top 5 most important comic books, period. These are the highlights of my collection and some that I just absolutely love. I know for me, when I was going to pick these books today, I tried to choose based on books that had incredible storytelling that for whatever reason resonated with me personally or kind of came about at an important time in my life. These books to me have some of the best comic book stories I have ever read. They're books I like to return to when I can, stories I often think about, and for me, that's what makes them important. I know there are other books in my collection that are probably worth more or might have other kind of value, but for me, when I think about important books, these are books that just scream to mind. I want to sincerely thank everyone who took time to watch this video. If you can, in the comments, let me know your 5 most important comic books to you. I'd love to hear what more people have to say with this incredible challenge. If you have your own YouTube channel, maybe even try to make a video of your own. Special thanks to Bunkmaster B on comics. This was such a fun challenge. I'm so happy I did this today. It was such a great kind of just nostalgia trip for me and a great way just to reflect on some of my favorites within my collection here. At any rate, thank you so much for watching. This has been the Comic Book Report. On your way out, please like this video and maybe check out some of my others. Have a good one.